My name is Nella, 35 years old. I've spent my life trying to earn my father's approval, but he's always seen me as insignificant. Today, in Meridian Enterprises' grand lobby, he introduced me as nobody to his colleagues, his words cutting deeper than he knew. I stood there fighting back tears, my grandmother's brooch, my only comfort. Then everything changed when security approached. If you're watching this, I'd love to know where you're viewing from. Like and subscribe to hear how I went from being called nobody to being addressed as Madam Chairwoman right in front of my father. I grew up in Boston with my father Richard, a mid-level executive at Meridian Enterprises, who wore his company position like a badge of honor. He wasn't always cold. I have faded memories of him smiling back when my mother Diana was still alive. She was the buffer between us, the translator of his harsh words into constructive criticism. But cancer took her when I was 15, leaving me defenseless against his disappointment. Nella, why can't you be more like Andrew? Became the soundtrack of my teenage years. My brother was the golden child 5 years my senior. He played by my father's rules, studied what my father wanted, became the son my father had always envisioned. I loved Andrew, but living in his shadow made me invisible in my own home. Even as a child, I was drawn to business magazines and economics books that my father would leave around. I'd secretly read them fascinated by the strategies and numbers that seemed to make sense in my mind, like puzzle pieces clicking together. Once when I was 12, I proudly showed my father a mock investment portfolio I'd created tracking stocks from the newspaper for 3 months. "Cute little project," he said, barely glancing at my carefully drawn charts. "But real business isn't for girls playing with colored pencils." Then, despite his dismissal, I excelled in school. Math came naturally to me, and economics became my passion. In high school, I joined the business club, became its president by junior year, and led our team to state finals in an entrepreneurship competition. My father skipped the award ceremony for a business dinner. When I graduated as valedictorian, I spotted an empty seat in the row reserved for my family. My speech about perseverance and believing in yourself echoed through the auditorium as I tried not to look at that vacant chair. Later, my father explained that a potential client had needed a last-minute meeting. "These are the sacrifices real business people make, Nella. You'll understand someday if you ever manage a real career." Through it all, my grandmother Eleanor was my sanctuary. Mom's mother lived an hour away, and I would escape to her house on weekends whenever possible. Unlike my father, she believed in me fiercely. "Your father sees the world through a keyhole," she told me on the night of my graduation, after he had critiqued my impractical speech. "But you, my dear, see doors where others see walls." The summer before college, as I prepared to leave for school, my grandmother gave me her precious emerald brooch, a family heirloom passed down through generations of strong women. "This belonged to your great-great-grandmother who started her own business when women weren't supposed to," she told me, pinning it to my blouse. "She knew her worth before anyone else did. So do you." I held that brooch like a talisman through the hardest times, a reminder that someone believed I would be greater than anyone expected. Even when my father looked at me and saw nothing but inadequacy, my grandmother saw potential waiting to bloom. When my acceptance letter arrived from Wharton School of Business, my father scoffed. "Must have been a light application year," he remarked, folding the letter without congratulating me. "Or maybe they needed more women for their diversity numbers." I had hoped that achieving entry into one of the most prestigious business schools in the country would finally earn his respect. Instead, it became another opportunity for him to minimize my accomplishments. I decided then that I would find a way to pay for school myself, rather than accept his financial help, which would undoubtedly come with constant reminders of how I didn't deserve to be there. Working 3 jobs while maintaining a full course load wasn't easy. Mornings at a coffee shop, evenings at the university library, and weekends doing bookkeeping for a local restaurant left little time for sleep, let alone a social life. But each paycheck felt like freedom. Each semester completed without my father's money was proof that I belonged there on my own merit. It was during my exhausting library shifts that I met Professor Harriet Winters, who changed the trajectory of my life. Noticing me falling asleep over financial journals one evening, she invited me to her office for coffee instead of reporting me to my supervisor. "You have unusual dedication," she observed after hearing about my schedule, "but you need mentorship more than you need another shift shelving books." Professor Winters introduced me to her network of business contacts and invited me to private seminars with visiting executives. Under her guidance, I learned to refine my natural instincts for market trends and business opportunities into actionable insights. She taught me that intuition, when backed by thorough research, was a powerful business tool often overlooked in traditional education. During my junior year, I met Jessica in an advanced investment strategies course. Unlike most of our competitive classmates, Jessica approached me about forming a study partnership rather than seeing me as rivalry. Late nights analyzing case studies turned into deep conversations about our aspirations. She became the sister I never had, the one person who understood both my drive and my wounds. "Your father sounds like he's afraid of you," Jessica said one night after I recounted another dismissive phone call with him. "Men like that can sense when someone has the potential to surpass them." I graduated summa cum laude with job offers from several investment firms. My father attended the ceremony, but responded to my achievements with a shrug. "Just a piece of paper," he said, looking bored as I showed him my honors distinction. "The real world will be your true test. Most people fail it." Despite my qualifications, finding employment in my desired field proved challenging. The financial crisis had tightened the job market, and the old boys network was still firmly in place at many prestigious firms. After 12 rejections, I took an entry-level position at Apex Ventures, a small but reputable investment firm known for taking chances on the emerging markets. My tiny desk in a crowded corner of the office became my kingdom. While others complained about the boring research assignments, I immersed myself in data, looking for patterns others missed. 6 months into my employment, I noticed a small tech startup with an innovative approach to data security that was being overlooked by larger investors. I spent weeks researching them, even visiting their modest headquarters after hours to better understand their product. Convinced of their potential, I prepared a detailed presentation and requested 5 minutes with my direct supervisor, Sam Donovan. 5 minutes turned into an hour, Sam later told colleagues. She knew more about that company than their own CEO. Apex invested $2 million based on my recommendation. 8 months later, when the startup was acquired by Google for $70 million, my career at Apex shifted dramatically. Suddenly, the cramped corner desk was replaced by a real office, and my recommendations were sought rather than ignored. Still, when I told my father about my first major success, he dismissed it as luck. "Playing with other people's money isn't real business," he said. "Anyone can get lucky once on someone else's dime." His words stung, but they no longer defined me. I had proven to myself what I was capable of, and that validation was starting to matter more than his approval. Within 3 years at Apex Ventures, I had become their top investment analyst. My reputation for spotting undervalued companies with massive potential earned me the nickname the Oracle among my colleagues. My compensation reflected my success, allowing me to purchase my first apartment and invest in my own portfolio. Each victory felt like another brick in the foundation of my self-worth, gradually building a structure strong enough to withstand my father's persistent doubts. During a routine market research session, I came across Meridian Enterprises, my father's company. The financials caught my attention immediately, not because they were impressive, but because they revealed a company in trouble despite having valuable assets and market position. Poor management decisions had led to declining profits, and their stock had dropped 30% over the previous 18 months. Under normal circumstances, I would have avoided any company connected to my father. But as I dug deeper into Meridian's situation, I recognized that beneath the mismanagement lay a company with tremendous untapped potential. Their technological patents alone were worth more than their current market valuation reflected. "This is strictly business," I told Jessica over dinner after explaining my interest in Meridian. "The company has potential that current leadership isn't maximizing. The fact that my father works there is irrelevant." "Is it, though?" she asked, giving me a knowing look. "Be honest with yourself about your motivations, Nella." She was right to question me. Part of me was drawn to Meridian because of my personal connection, but I was professional enough to ensure my analysis remained objective. I spent weeks researching every aspect of the company, building financial models and drafting a comprehensive restructuring plan that could return Meridian to profitability within 18 months. When I presented my findings to Apex's investment committee, I disclosed my personal connection, but emphasized that my interest was purely professional. To my surprise, they were intrigued rather than concerned. "Your inside knowledge gives us an edge," the head of the committee said. "We trust your judgment." Apex made a significant investment in Meridian, acquiring 15% of the company's shares over 3 months. As the firm's point person on the investment, I was tasked with monitoring our position closely. This gave me legitimate reason to attend shareholder meetings and access detailed company information. At my first shareholders meeting, I sat quietly in the back, observing the current leadership team struggle to explain their poor results. My father was there, of course, defending the very policies that were driving the company into the ground. He didn't notice me, which was not surprising. I had become skilled at being invisible when necessary. After the meeting, I approached several major shareholders independently, introducing myself as an Apex representative. Their frustration with current management was evident, and they were receptive when I mentioned having alternative strategies to consider. Over the next few weeks, I met privately with these shareholders, walking them through my restructuring plan. My presentation included cutting unnecessary expenses, reorganizing departments for greater efficiency, and most importantly, leveraging Meridian's underutilized patents to create new revenue streams. "Who developed this strategy?" asked Walter Griffin, Meridian's largest individual shareholder, clearly impressed. "This shows more understanding of our business than I've seen from people who've been here 20 years. "I did," I replied simply, "based on extensive research and analysis." Word of my plan spread among key shareholders. When 3 board positions opened up following a particularly disastrous quarterly report, I received a call from Walter Griffin. "We'd like to nominate you for the board," he said. "Your vision for Meridian is exactly what we need." I accepted the nomination, but requested something unusual. "I'd prefer to keep my involvement relatively private initially," I explained. "I believe my recommendations will be evaluated more objectively that way." The board agreed to my request, allowing me to operate primarily through written communications, using only my first name. It wasn't about hiding, but about ensuring my ideas would be judged on their merit, rather than being dismissed because of my age, gender, or family connection. The board elections at Meridian came during a period of intense scrutiny from investors. The company's stock had hit a 5-year low, and shareholders were demanding change. When the votes were tallied, not only had I secured a board position, but the existing members, impressed by my restructuring strategy, nominated me for the chairperson role. The vote was unanimous. "We need fresh thinking," Walter Griffin told me after the election. "Your plan is the most comprehensive and innovative approach we've seen." I accepted the position with mixed emotions. Pride in the achievement, certainly, but also anxiety about how to navigate my new authority. The irony wasn't lost on me that I now outranked my father in his own company, though he remained unaware of this fact. My decision to operate behind the scenes initially was practical. I wanted my policies implemented based on their merit, not undermined by personal politics. Board communications went out under my first name only, and I conducted most meetings virtually, or through representatives when possible. The implementation of my restructuring plan began immediately. We eliminated redundant positions, streamlined decision-making processes, and reallocated resources to the most promising divisions. The hardest decisions involved layoffs, which I insisted be handled with dignity and generous severance packages. Unlike previous leadership, I refused to cut corners on employee treatment, believing that how we handled difficult transitions would define the company's future culture. Within the first quarter of my leadership, Meridian's stock price stabilized. By the second quarter, we showed modest growth. Employees reported higher satisfaction as decision-making became more transparent and merit-based promotions replaced the old system of favoritism. My father's position as a departmental director remained secure, but his influence diminished as new management practices took hold. He began complaining about the changes during our infrequent family dinners. "This new chairperson is destroying everything we built," he ranted one Sunday. "Nobody even knows who they are, just sends out directives like some invisible dictator." "Maybe their ideas have merit," I suggested, carefully studying his reaction. "Merit," he scoffed. "They're probably some young hotshot with fancy degrees but no real experience. Book smarts don't build businesses." The irony of his statement nearly made me laugh aloud. Here he was dismissing me again without realizing it. Part of me wanted to reveal myself right then, to watch his face as he realized his daughter was the invisible dictator he so despised. But the timing wasn't right. The company transformation was still underway, and I needed to prove the long-term success of my strategy before making any personal revelations. As months passed, my confidence grew alongside Meridian's improving performance. Each successful quarter validated my approach and strengthened my position. My habit of working late in my private office at headquarters became a comfortable routine, though I was careful to avoid times when my father might be in the building. The emotional toll of keeping my success secret was greater than I'd anticipated. Jessica became my primary confidant, listening to my frustrations and celebrating my victories when I couldn't share them with anyone else. "You realize you're living in a corporate fairy tale, right?" she teased during one of our wine nights. "The secret princess running the kingdom while disguised as a commoner." "Except in this version, the princess doesn't need a prince to rescue her," I replied, laughing. "She just needs a really good quarterly earnings report." As Meridian's annual company-wide meeting approached, I knew the time had come to step out from behind the curtain. The company had not only stabilized, but was now showing impressive growth. My restructuring plan had saved hundreds of jobs that would otherwise have been eliminated. We had launched 2 new product lines based on previously unutilized patents, both exceeding revenue projections. The decision to reveal myself was cemented when I overheard my father at a family gathering boasting to relatives about how he was guiding the company through challenges, despite the interference from that invisible chair. The annual meeting would be my moment to set the record straight, not just with my father, but with the entire company. I marked the date on my calendar and began preparing for what would undoubtedly be one of the most pivotal moments of my life. I woke before my alarm on the morning of the company-wide meeting, my mind already racing with thoughts of the day ahead. After 3 hours of fitful sleep, I gave up on rest and stood before my closet contemplating what one wears to reveal themselves as the secret chairperson to a father who has never believed in them. I selected a tailored navy suit that projected authority without ostentation. The final touch was my grandmother's emerald brooch, which I pinned near my heart. "For courage," I whispered, remembering her belief in me when no one else had it. Jessica arrived at 7, carrying coffee and emotional support in equal measure. She had been my rock throughout this journey, and I needed her perspective this morning more than ever. "You look like a boss," she said, handing me a latte. "How are you feeling?" "Like I might throw up," I admitted, smoothing my jacket for the 10th time. "What if he makes a scene? What if the whole thing backfires?" Jessica took my hand, stopping their nervous fidgeting. "Listen to me. You've earned this moment. You've turned that company around based on your brilliance, not your last name. Whatever happens with your father today doesn't change that." My phone buzzed with a text from the board secretary confirming the meeting details. "All board members will be seated on stage. We have a record attendance for this meeting, Madam Chairwoman." "Everyone's curious about the mysterious chair who saved Meridian," Jessica remarked, reading the text over my shoulder. "They're in for quite a show." The drive to headquarters felt surreal. I had made this journey countless times over the past year, but always with the shield of semi-anonymity. Today, I would walk through those doors as Nella Richards' daughter, but also as Nella Meridian's chairwoman. The 2 identities would finally collide. I arrived early, using the executive entrance to avoid running into my father prematurely. My executive team was waiting in the conference room adjacent to the auditorium, where the meeting would be held. Their warm greetings calmed my nerves slightly. "The board members are all here," my CFO informed me, "including your father, though he doesn't know he'll be sitting in the audience today rather than on stage with department heads." "How is he?" I couldn't help asking. My HR director grimaced. "He's been difficult this morning, complaining about the new management structure again, telling anyone who'll listen that the company is losing its identity. The usual." I nodded unsurprised. And the security team? Briefed and ready, they know to meet you in the main lobby at precisely 10:30. My original plan had been to enter through the executive entrance directly to the auditorium. But something had shifted in me over the past few days. I was tired of hiding, tired of taking the back routes, tired of diminishing myself to make others comfortable. Today, I would walk through the front door like the chairperson I was. Change of plans, I announced to my team. I'm coming in through the main lobby. Make sure security knows. As my team dispersed to make final preparations, my phone buzzed again. A text from Andrew, my brother, who was the only family member I had trusted with the truth about my position. Go get him, sis. It's about time someone showed Dad what you're really made of. I wish I could be there to see his face. Andrew had moved to London years ago, partly to escape our father's overwhelming expectations. Despite his own success, he understood better than anyone the particular pain of never measuring up to Richard's impossible standards. His support meant everything. I took a deep breath, gathered my notes, and prepared to face the moment I had been working toward for years. No more hiding, no more seeking approval. Today was about owning my achievement and leading from the front. At 10:30 precisely, I stepped out of my town car in front of Meridian's headquarters. The modern glass building towered 40 stories above Manhattan, its lobby a vast space of marble and steel, designed to impress visitors with the company's prosperity and power. I had always found it slightly intimidating, but today I reminded myself that I was responsible for ensuring that prosperity continued. The lobby was unusually crowded for a weekday morning, filled with employees and executives arriving for the annual meeting. I spotted my father immediately standing near the central fountain with a group of his colleagues. His voice carried across the space as he held court louder than necessary, a habit I had always found embarrassing. For a moment, I considered avoiding the confrontation, taking the side entrance after all. Then I remembered all the times he had made me feel small, invisible, unworthy. I squared my shoulders, touched my grandmother's brooch for strength, and walked directly toward him. He didn't notice me at first, too engrossed in his story about a golf game with clients. I stood patiently at the edge of his circle, waiting to be acknowledged. When he finally glanced my way, his expression shifted from surprise to mild annoyance. "Nella," he said, his tone suggesting I was interrupting something important. "What brings you here? The shareholders' meeting is closed to the public." "Hello, Father," I replied calmly. "I thought I'd say hello before the meeting." His colleagues looked at me with vague curiosity. One of them, Thomas Wilson, a man I knew to be my father's closest ally in the company, raised an eyebrow. "Is this your daughter, Richard? The one who works at that little investment place?" My father nodded dismissively. "Yes, Nella's at some small firm, Apex something." He turned to me. "Why are you really here? This isn't a social event." I maintained my composure, despite the familiar sting of his dismissal. "I have business at Meridian today." He laughed, a sharp sound without humor. "Business? What business could you possibly have here? You're a junior analyst at a company nobody has heard of." His colleagues chuckled, exchanging glances that made my cheeks burn. I had anticipated this reaction, prepared for it, yet the reality still hurt more than I wanted to admit. "Actually," I began, but my father cut me off. "Nella has always had big aspirations," he told the group as if I weren't standing right there. "But business is business. You need more than dreams to succeed in this world." He turned to me, his expression a mixture of condescension and false sympathy. "You should stick to what you know, darling. Leave the real corporate work to people who understand it." Thomas Wilson nodded in agreement. "Not everyone is cut out for the big leagues, dear. No shame in that." "Exactly," my father continued, warming to his theme. "Nella's a nobody in this industry. She doesn't understand how real business works." The words nobody hung in the air between us. I felt tears threatening and forced them back, refusing to show weakness now. All around us, other employees had slowed their pace, sensing the drama unfolding. My father, oblivious to the audience, or perhaps energized by it, seemed ready to continue his assessment of my inadequacies. At that precise moment, 3 security officers in Meridian's distinctive blue uniforms approached our group. The head of security, a tall woman named Sandra, whom I had personally hired during the restructuring, stepped forward with perfect timing. "Good morning, Madam Chairwoman," she said clearly, her voice carrying across the now hushed lobby. "The board members are assembled and waiting for you to begin the meeting." May I escort you to the auditorium? The silence that followed was absolute. My father's face drained of color, his mouth opening and closing without sound. His colleagues stared at me in shock, processing the implications of the security officer's greeting. I allowed myself one moment to absorb the scene to imprint it in my memory. Then I nodded to Sandra with the composed dignity of someone who had earned her position through merit and hard work. Thank you, Sandra. Please let the board know I'll be there momentarily. The security team formed a respectful escort around me. As we moved toward the executive elevator, whispers erupted throughout the lobby. Employees who had witnessed the exchange were already spreading the news. Richard's daughter, the one he had just called a nobody, was actually their chairwoman. My father remained frozen in place, his face a mask of disbelief and dawning horror as the implications sank in. Only when we reached the elevator did he suddenly lurch forward, following us in a daze. The doors closed on his stunned expression, and we began the ascent to the top floor. The elevator ride was excruciating in its silence. My father stared straight ahead, his jaw clenched, his hands gripping the railing so tightly his knuckles turned white. I could almost see the calculations happening behind his eyes, the mental review of every dismissive comment, every belittling remark he had made about the invisible chair over the past year. When the doors opened onto the executive floorboard, members were waiting to greet me. Walter Griffin stepped forward first, shaking my hand warmly. "Madam Chairwoman, we're ready when you are." I nodded my thanks and walked confidently into the boardroom, taking my place at the head of the table. My father, directed by an assistant, found himself seated far down the side of the table, a physical manifestation of our reversed positions. As everyone settled in, I met his eyes briefly across the polished surface. For the first time in my life, my father looked at me with something other than disappointment. In that moment, I saw confusion, shock, and perhaps the beginning of something I had never expected to receive from him: respect. The meeting proceeded exactly as planned, though with an emotional undercurrent I hadn't fully anticipated. I presented the company's remarkable turnaround with calm authority, outlining how our strategic repositioning had not only saved Meridian from potential bankruptcy, but positioned us for sustainable growth. The room erupted in applause when I announced that our success meant we could prevent the previously planned layoffs of 200 employees. Throughout my presentation, I was acutely aware of my father sitting silently at the far end of the table. He neither spoke nor made eye contact, his gaze fixed on the papers before him. The man who always had an opinion, who dominated every conversation, had been rendered speechless. After the formal proceedings concluded, board members crowded around to congratulate me, many expressing how they had come to respect my leadership long before knowing my identity. Walter Griffin clasped my hand between both of his. "I knew you were exceptional from our first meeting," he said warmly, "but I never suspected you were Richard's daughter." The apple fell far from the tree in the best possible way. When the room finally cleared, my father remained seated, staring at the now empty chair where I had presented. I dismissed my assistant and closed the door, leaving us alone for the first time since the revelation. "How long?" he asked without looking up, his voice barely audible. "Almost 14 months, I replied, taking a seat across from him. "Since the board elections last year?" He finally raised his eyes to meet mine, anger replacing his earlier shock. "You went behind my back. You took over my company without even telling me." "Your company?" I couldn't help the edge that crept into my voice. "Meridian belongs to its shareholders' dad, and they chose me to lead it because I presented a vision that made sense when the previous leadership was driving it into the ground." "You deliberately humiliated me," he accused, his face flushing. "All this time you could have told me, but you chose to let me find out in public in front of everyone." I took a deep breath, determined to maintain my composure. "I didn't tell you because you would have undermined me at every turn. You've spent my entire life telling me I'm not good enough, not smart enough, not capable enough. Why would I expect you to suddenly support me as your superior at work?" "That's not true," he protested weakly. "I've always wanted what's best for you." "What's best for me?" I couldn't hold back a short, incredulous laugh. "You missed my valedictorian speech for a business dinner. You told me my acceptance to Wharton was just luck or diversity quotas. When I made my first major investment success, you called it playing with other people's money. Just 30 minutes ago, you called me a nobody in front of your colleagues. Each example landed like a physical blow. My father seemed to shrink in his chair, the righteous anger draining from him as the evidence of his behavior accumulated. I earned this position, I continued more gently. I didn't use our connection. In fact, I succeeded despite it. I wanted to prove to myself more than anyone that I could do this on my merit. We sat in silence for several minutes, the weight of years of misunderstanding and hurt stretching between us. Finally, my father spoke, his voice uncharacteristically hesitant. The restructuring plan, the patent utilization strategy, the new product lines. That was all you? I nodded. All me, with a great team implementing, of course. He rubbed his hand across his face, suddenly looking older than his 62 years. I didn't see it. Any of it. I looked right at you your entire life and didn't see what was right in front of me. It wasn't quite an apology, but from my father, this admission was unprecedented. I felt something shift between us. Not a complete healing, but a crack in the wall that had separated us for so long. We saved the company, I said quietly. The quarterly reports speak for themselves. Whatever personal issues we have, the business decisions were sound. He nodded slowly. More than sound. Brilliant, actually. The word seemed to cost him something to say, but he continued. I've been in this industry 30 years, and I didn't see the potential in those dormant patents. You did. The praise so long withheld, and now finally given, landed strangely. Part of me still craved his approval, while another part had moved beyond needing it. I realized I had built my sense of worth on foundations he hadn't laid, constructed from my own achievements and the validation of mentors and colleagues who saw my true value. Where do we go from here? He asked finally. Professionally, nothing changes. I'm still the chairwoman, and you're still a department director. I expect the same level of respect and cooperation I receive from other directors. I kept my voice firm, but not unkind. Personally, that's more complicated. We have a lot of history to work through. He nodded again, accepting boundaries he would have rejected violently just hours before. I'd like to try, he said simply, to do better. It wasn't everything, but it was a beginning. As he left the boardroom, his shoulders stooped in a way I had never seen before. I felt no triumph in his humbling. Instead, I felt the quiet satisfaction of having finally stood in my power, not to prove him wrong, but to be true to myself. In the months that followed, Meridian continued to thrive under my leadership. I established a mentorship program specifically designed to support young women in business, remembering how Professor Winters had changed my trajectory with her belief in me. The program became one of our most successful community initiatives, generating positive press and attracting diverse talent to the company. My relationship with my father evolved slowly, painfully at times. There were setbacks and difficult conversations, moments when old patterns reasserted themselves. But there were also breakthroughs. The first time he asked for my opinion on a business matter, and actually listened to my response. The day he defended my decision to a dissenting board member. Small steps toward mutual respect. At Jessica's urging, I began sharing my story at women's leadership conferences, speaking honestly about the challenges I had faced and the strategies that had helped me overcome them. Women would approach me afterward, sharing their own stories of being underestimated and dismissed. The real triumph isn't proving others wrong, I would tell them. It's proving yourself right, building success that no one can deny or take away from you. 1 year after the lobby revelation, I stood at the podium during another company-wide meeting. As I announced Meridian's record-breaking quarter, my hand unconsciously reached up to touch my grandmother's brooch, still pinned near my heart. I thought of how proud she would be, not just of my professional success, but of the inner peace I had found. Because that was the greatest lesson in my journey: success without inner peace is empty. I had achieved the external validation I once craved, but the real victory was internal. I no longer needed my father or anyone else to confirm my worth. I knew it myself, bone deep and unshakable. Have you ever had to prove your worth to someone who refused to see it? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Remember to like this video if it resonated with you, subscribe for more stories of unexpected triumph, and share with someone who might need to be reminded of their own worth today. Thank you for listening to my journey from nobody to chairwoman. And remember, the most important person who needs to believe in you is yourself.